Conclusions, what you need to know. Finally, we are at the end of this essay with the last body or the last paragraph of the entire piece. And conclusions are often where students lose points because one, they're just done and over doing this essay, and they usually do not know what to include in it. So these are some things that you need to know and to make sure that you include in your conclusion for your essay. So why is a conclusion so important? Students often say, well, why do I need to restate anything? I've already given you all of my evidence, and that should be enough. Well, it's kind of like watching a TV series or a movie, and there's no finality to it. It just ends. And so that kind of drives you crazy. When I watch The Sopranos, if any of you have ever seen that TV series, it just kind of ends. You don't know what happens to any of them, and the show is over forever. And so there, you kind of feel like you're left wondering or going, hey, well, wait a minute, what was all of that for? And if you don't have a conclusion, that's what your reader ends up with. Like, wait a minute, what was all of that for? And so a lot of times students will put all of this work into a paper and have all of their evidence and make all their claims. But then it's like, okay, well, what was all of that work for? Because there is nothing that is a final statement or a conclusion. So that's why conclusions are so important. So it provides a bridge back to your focus or theme or position. So going back to whatever it is that your essay is about, whether it's this particular essay or any essay, what was the focus? What was the theme? What was the position that you took? Why was this paper and what you presented so important? So it bridges back to that introduction, back to that focus on why you wrote this paper. It helps the reader, i.e. me, to see the importance of all of the work that you have done, all of your analysis, all of the analysis is your own words, all of the information that you've provided from your articles. It helps me to see the importance of that. Otherwise, again, it just seems as though you've copied and pasted and you haven't learned anything. The conclusion really helps to, again, bridge that information and show the importance of the work that you've done. It allows you to have your final say, leaving the reader with no doubt that you've addressed or covered the topic and theme. So you want to say like, okay, look, I've really learned this, and this is what I truly feel, or this is what it is that I really have found. And again, the reader will see that, and the reader will believe what it is that you're trying to address with that topic or theme. It makes a good impression on the reader, at least a good conclusion will. And that reader will want to be glad that they've read your paper. And they'll be like, oh, okay, I get that. I see where they're coming from. I see all of the work that they've put into that on that theme or on that topic, or trying to support their particular position. You want to leave an impression on your reader, because this is the last thing that you're saying in regards to all of the work that you have done so far. And I know I have told this to you guys before. I've had many times where I've read very good papers that had, that introduced the topic well, that gave me good support, that made good points, and then all of a sudden it just ends. Kind of like my example of the show The Sopranos. It just ended, and then you're kind of angry and you're like, well, seriously, I just wasted all that time for nothing. I still have questions and comments, and it just doesn't make any sense. So you want to leave that good impression on the reader and make them glad that they've read your paper. So there are 4 major objectives to a conclusion, and then I'll kind of explain what you can do to make sure that you meet those objectives. So 4 things for conclusion is not really that big of a deal. It's not that difficult. So 1, you need to revisit your thesis statement. Notice it doesn't say rewrite or restate. It's revisiting. And so you need to go back to what your focus is, and you need to state it using different words. So many times you guys just copy and paste your thesis statement and use it again. You got to say it in a different way, and use different words. Obviously, it's going to be the same focus, but it's not the exact same words that you've already used in an introduction. I shouldn't be rereading your introduction at the end of your paper. That's not what a conclusion does. So you're revisiting the thesis, because remember in the last slide, it says it's a bridge. And so that thesis kind of connects you to that introduction. You should be providing a brief summary and major highlights from the body paragraphs. So you have 3 body paragraphs of reasons that support your claim, and you have a counterclaim. So there should be 4 things that you can add or talk about in your conclusion that is just the summary or the highlights of what it is that you have found. And so that's going to add to the bulk of your conclusion. Many times I have conclusions that are only like 2 or 3 sentences. Well, thus far, you have your revisiting of your statement, which could be 2 or 3 sentences. You're providing a brief summary or highlights. That's obviously going to be 3 or 4 sentences, right? And then you need to indicate why it's important. What was the significance of your findings? Why is it something that should be important, and that the reader, meaning me, looks at your paper and says, yes, I understand that, and I agree with their findings. And finally, you should have a call for action or provide a future development of your subject or topic. And so for us with this essay, a call for action would be to either continue to have Shakespeare taught in schools, and maybe you can give reasons why, or, say from your personal experience without using I, or to call to action that schools need to discontinue doing these types of lessons within schools. So that's your call for action. And that's where you're going to use your rhetorical devices that are those emotional and logical appeals. So how do you do all of that? How do you do the 4 things, the 4 major objectives in a conclusion paragraph? Okay, so there's several things. One, you're going to make sure your thesis is restated using different words. So you need to look at that thesis statement that you wrote at the beginning in your intro and just state it differently. Maybe clump everything together. Maybe just restate it backwards using different words. So how can you restate that thesis? You want to give examples from your body paragraphs. And again, using different words and phrases. So in your body paragraphs, obviously, if they're 6, 7 sentences long, you don't want to do that. How can you sum up each of those body paragraphs? Or what is the major focus of each of those body paragraphs, being 1 sentence each? Make a reference to the hook that you used or the information that you use in the introduction, and you're going to connect those. So many of you used information about Shakespeare's life, or you talked about how he was an important writer, and many of you who talked about him being an important writer, you cited with the idea that it should continue to be taught. And so you want to make that connection. Some of you talked about how he's so well known and famous, but that doesn't mean he's famous or well known in this time. And so again, you want to make that connection back to your introduction. Use those rhetorical appeals we worked on at the beginning of this unit, where we talked about ethos, logos, and pathos with those logical and ethical and emotional appeals. If you forgot what those were, you need to go back in the notes. You need to go back on your worksheets and take a look at that and make sure that you're appealing to reason and logic, and you're appealing to emotions of your reader. You want to relate your subject or your conclusion back to the real world today. Like, how can we use that information in today's schools, in today's society, for today's students? And one thing that's really important, you don't want to use personal pronouns. And a personal pronoun are these types of things down here. You don't want to ever use I or you or me or we. Don't use those. You can use, if you're trying to talk about people, you can say society, you can say students, but you never want to use, especially personal pronoun of I. You don't want to use the words in conclusion. I know when you were younger, you used those, and that was good then, but we shouldn't use these type of phrases. You shouldn't say to conclude, or in summary, or to sum up, or in my opinion. You don't use those types of things. And so I'm sure you're wondering, well, geez, Krolak, what am I supposed to use? Well, use things like this. Use finally, there is no doubt that, and you just state it clearly, and then just state although, overall. Those are good things to use instead of using in conclusion or to conclude or in my opinion. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you use one of those and make sure that it just fits with what it is that you're saying in your conclusion. So when you're writing your conclusion, you need to look back at all of these slides and make sure that you look at this information that's on this final slide here, making sure that you've used all of that information. Because again, if you guys are not using the information that is provided in these notes and it's obvious in your work, you're going to lose points for that. So please make sure that you try to get all of this information in your conclusion, that you get your conclusion in on time so that I can grade it, make comments, and that you can fix it for your final submission next week. Okay, again, if you guys have any questions, please make sure that you're emailing me, that you're rewriting, that you're looking back at your notes, and do the best that you can, and we'll work on making corrections for next week's final essay.